All right, so we're here today to talk about how Infor's data migration factory can work for you. So our agenda today will include introductions and some housekeeping items. I will do a quick Intellias overview. We'll talk about what the data migration factory is, preparing for a data migration and implementation, considerations for a data migration, the data migration factory process itself, migration efforts, talk a little bit about whether or not this is going to be the best option for your organization. I have some insights from some of our customer projects, and then we'll conclude with questions. So let's get right to housekeeping here. All right, well, with me today is Mr. Byer. Mike is the principal consultant here at Intellias, and my name is Debbie Sherman. I am the solution architect. So we ask that throughout the presentation, you place your questions in the chat, and we will answer all those at the end of the session. And as Chandra indicated, it will be recorded and sent out after the presentation. You can also find us on YouTube and LinkedIn. So let me tell you a little bit about Intellias. So we're headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and we're established in 1999. We are an Infor Alliance partner, and we offer consulting services around Infor Lawson technical services, Infor Lawson upgrades, Infor Lawson application consulting, Infor Cloud Suite services, and Infor Cloud Suite consulting for GHR as well as FSM. And we also offer some other software offerings to make your processes a little more efficient. So if you're in need of assistance or have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to help. All right, so we're going to get into the meat of this conversation. So what is Data Migration Factory? So it's commonly referred to as DMF, and I'm going to be referring to it as DMF for the remainder of the presentation. So this is a piece of Infor's product development. It's a conversion tool set and service that Infor provides. I apologize, I am having issues speaking this morning. Infor provides to their Cloud Suite clients. So it's used both on the GHR, which is Global Human Resources, and the FSM, which is Finance and Supply Management sides. So for those of you that are Lawson users, the new version of Lawson in the cloud is called Finance and Supply Chain Management or Global Human Resources, just so you can connect the two. So DMF is included in your Infor subscription. So again, it is a service that Infor offers to you all. And it maps and loads your data, your historical data, including configuration data from S3 or Legacy Lawson into FSM, HRT, which is HR Talent, or HRP, which is HR Payroll. So instead of the old-fashioned conversions utilizing uploads or DB imports, this is a tool they've put together to assist and to make this process much smoother and much quicker. You have the ability to migrate large amounts of data, large amounts. And I'm talking, we've recently had a client that we loaded, I believe, 27 years of data. So they also offer services around archiving your legacy Lawson data to the data lake. So that is something you would want to talk to your Infor customer manager separately about. All right. So next is preparing for your data migration. I cannot tell you enough, and I harp on this all of the time. Data cleansing is one of the most important things you can do prior to any new implementation, regardless of whether you're going from Legacy Lawson to FSM or any system to another, all right? Garbage out of a system is going to be garbage into FSM, and we don't want that. It's important that the data you're migrating has value to your organization. So this is the time to take a look at that data, to scrub it as clean as you can get it. So inactivate unused financial data, companies, accounting units, accounts, projects, your purchasing data. Take a look at companies and vendors and suppliers. As far as your master data goes, unused bank accounts, cash codes that are no longer applicable, payment codes that are no longer used, terms that are obsolete, customers that you don't bill any longer. Look at your item master and get rid of things that are no longer used. Purchasing and ship to locations, are they still valid? And as far as transactional data goes, review and resolve any aged AP credit balances. If you've got a credit from a vendor that's sitting out on your books and it's 5 years old, pick up the phone, call the vendor and find out why. Get that stuff cleaned up. You really don't want to bring that along with you to a new system where you have new enhancements and new capabilities. Take a look at your invoice not received. Take a look at the R&I, or the receipt not invoiced. Do you have invoices that were paid outside of the PO process? And if that's the case, then let's get that R&I off the books. This is a great time to take a look at your assets. Review those and determine that are there things that we can dispose of. Okay? Perform an inventory. Get everything trued up and synced up. Resolve unapproved and unreleased requisitions. Those should be looked at on a regular basis to begin with, but many companies find they don't have the resources to do a lot of these activities. Review and resolve aging open PO lines and receipts, right? I don't know how often we as consultants work with our clients to get these items closed. Something is matched against a line on a purchase order, it leaves an open balance, but they don't always close. So, looking at those things and working on them on a regular basis and getting that data cleaned up is really important when you're getting ready to implement and migrate to a new system. Look at unreleased inventory transactions and expired contracts. So this is all at a very high level. We've done a couple of webinars on preparing for your FSM upgrade, and you can find those out on YouTube, and those really get into the nuts and bolts of what you can do specifically and in detail to get these things cleaned up. So again, data cleansing is very important before you get ready for this migration. All right, so preparing for your data migration again. Know what data needs to be migrated. This is always a discussion that we have with our clients. Have internal discussions with your leaders and your subject matter experts. Start talking about what requirements do we have around retention for regulatory processes. Off the top of my head, I can tell you that in the healthcare world, Medicare has retention requirements. It used to be 7 years. I believe it still is. So they have to maintain documentation and data for that period of time. Are there other regulatories? If you're doing things in the utility business, there's, the Department of Energy has retention regulations. What about your financial or purchasing policies and procedures? Do those have retention policies? Many organizations have their own internal policies. So you need to take those things into consideration. What data needs to be maintained, and also for how long? So what number of years do you need to do this, right? And then what is the plan for data archiving? Regardless of the amount of data that you're going to migrate from legacy Lawson to FSM, there's still going to be some that's not migrated. What's the plan for accessing that? What will be your future plan for being able to get to that information? You want to consider audit requirements as well as any other requirements you have. So these discussions are really important at the beginning of the conversation to know ahead of time what your needs are going to be. All right, so considerations for a data migration. You need to talk through, and you will generally during the beginning of an implementation project, you do some type of discovery with your implementation partner. That discovery entails, what are we going to do with our current structure, and what is that structure going to look like in the new system? And that's regardless of whether it's HR, finance, your global ledger, payables, supply chain, purchasing. Are you going to use some of the new modules like strategic sourcing and the supplier portal, etc.? So all of those things are usually generally discussed at the beginning of a project. Out of that will come, what are we going to do? How are we going to structure our system? So there's opportunities to standardize there. You'll be looking at your chart of accounts. Are you going to be changing that up? Many times a good example for global ledger is in Lawson, we see a lot of clients utilize what they consider sub-accounts. However, they're not using that true sub-account functionality. So how will that look in the new system? Will those be combined? Will you create new unique accounts for those? And there's a reason for you're doing all of this, right? Because if you've done any type of an upgrade or implementation, you know that mapping is key to getting the old into a new format. Expanding your general ledger distribution string. So today in Lawson, you have components of your general ledger distribution string that consist of a company, an accounting unit, an account, a project, and a category. Now, all of you may not use all 5 of those, but you are limited to 5 and sub-account within Lawson. Within FSM, the new system, you have up to 14 you can utilize. So I know that seems like a big number, but let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So today, if you're a hospital group or maybe you're a hotel group, you have different companies, but your departments consist of maybe a location of a hospital or a hotel combined with the department it belongs to, right? Because you're restricted to just that accounting unit. With the new system, you can look at defining those individually and being able to report at a more granular level using those finance dimensions. So those 5 components that you have in the GL string in Lawson today translate to what we call finance dimensions in the world of the new system. And you can break those out so that you have different ways to gather and report on data. So those conversations need to be had. Reorganization. Are you reorganizing your company? And consolidation. Did you recently purchase a company that you want to bring into the fold? So you're going to consolidate everything. You have to identify all of those pieces before you can determine if DMF is the tool you can use. So again, you also need to decide on how much data you're going to migrate. What is the best solution for your organization? Now, Infor recommends bringing in the current fiscal year in detail, plus 2 years, either in summary or detail. You are not restricted to that, but that is their recommendation. And that's primarily what we see as consultants across the board. But then I will be honest with you, given that DMF can do more than the initial 3 years, we tend to see 4 or 5, even up to 7. So that ability is there to be able to bring that data in. So based on the answers to the above questions, how your organization may change, how your financial structure or your purchasing structure might change, and what amount of data you'd like to pull in and what data is going to be archived, then we start talking about translating and mapping. So mapping for new accounts and changes. So back to my example where we have a company and today the department consists of a location for that hospital or for that hotel, and the accounting department, that may be, for instance, I have a hotel in Georgia. That is location 10 and the finance department is 2000. So your AU today could be 10, 2000. In the future, you would have a company 1, you would have a location 10, and you would have a department of 2000. So that department for finance can be standardized across the board, and we can map that. We can take today's accounting unit and split it up and say, okay, we're going to take this and now map it to this location and this accounting unit. So there's many different things we can do to help with that, and DMF will support a lot of that. And also, again, you're accommodating for new finance dimensions, whether they're I apologize, guys. My coworker is misbehaving over here. So based on all of that, it's very important to determine how you're going to do that. And if you have new dimensions that are going to be in the system, you may not map to them, but we still need to take that into consideration. And then also validation and testing efforts. Validation and testing is done for each pass, but the level of effort for each of those passes could be different. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide. So that said, what limitations are there with DMF? Right? So there are some exclusions to what can be migrated and what can be mapped. One of those considerations that we talk about is, the pristine build and cutover plan. So unfortunately, DMF does not really allow or support for a traditional pristine build for additional modules. So we can load an FEG, which is a finance enterprise group. That is your financial structure within FSM. But we don't load historical balances up. You know, if you close a month, we load that balance. If you close the next month, you load the next balance. As a result of that, it can change how cutover looks. and what additional steps may be required to get that data loaded into the system. So a lot of times we're rebuilding new modules if necessary. So it's a consideration that has to be, looked into. There are scenarios that are not supported by DMF, and those are migrating to a live data area. So if you're already live on FSM and you'd like to bring in another module, they can't do that. They will not migrate into a live data area. Migration of existing RICE. So RICE are your reports, interfaces, customizations, and extensions. Those all have to be rebuilt in the new system. And I think that's pretty standard, whether you're for any type of ERP system. The implementation of new applications. So if they don't exist in Lawson, we can't migrate them, right? And one of the great things about the new version of Lawson is that there are a lot of modules that are new. There are a lot of enhancements. So as part of your implementation of FSM, you're dealing with those separately. Migration of data from a non-S3 or a non-Infor or landmark environment, obviously. Combining multiple entities into one, it can get tricky. So there's some limitations around that one. And then breaking one entity into multiple entities. You cannot exclude a module. So if you're migrating and decide I'm not going to do projects, you cannot exclude projects from the migration. So again, a consideration that this may not be the way you need to go. And then a complete master data restructure or reorganization, it's not going to be the tool for you. It will not work. All right. There are some applications that are also excluded from migration. One of those is cost allocations. So in Legacy Lawson today, CA is the cost allocation module that has to be rebuilt in Global Ledger. It is integrated with Global Ledger in FSM. And one thing you'll note, today in Lawson, you have General Ledger, and we all pretty much know the GL to be General Ledger. FSM has rebranded that to Global Ledger. And the reason for that is because they really have brought all the pieces of finance into one, right? Budgets. So if you're using the FB module, that has to be uploaded into Global Ledger. Report writer, those have to be rebuilt in either Burst, utilizing Infor BI, or the new enhancements around GL Report Writer or columnar reporting. Strategic ledger no longer exists. There is no need for that within FSM. And then multi-ledger has been replaced by reporting bases in FSM. So different, totally different functionality. Again, more around of how they do the coding in the background and how they all work together. So given that we are now utilizing a complete and different way of being able to cut and slice and dice reports in the new system, the reporting basis helps with that significantly. So lease management no longer exists or has to be a third party. And the same with employee expense. The EE module no longer exists. You need to rebuild that in XM, which is Infor's product for expense management, or a third party. Now, if you're using something like Concur and you are bringing things in through the EE module, you can just as easily create a new interface that brings them directly into the AP module through what's called a payables invoice import, or what you know today is your AP 520. So there are other options for this, but that EE module no longer exists. And again, as I said, there's alternate options for getting these into the system. All right, the DMF process itself. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen if you make the decision to utilize Data Migration Factory. So first of all, it is a very highly coordinated effort. There is collaboration between the Infor DMF team, between your implementation partner, and you, the client yourself. There is a lot of this work that the DMF team will do themselves. So first of all, you have up to 5 data migrations. Generally, there are 3 test passes, and those are done usually for conference room pilot. So CRP is a testing phase you'll do with your implementation partner. It'll be the first stage of testing. It generally allows the client to become familiar with the system at more of a generic vanilla level. It builds in your data. However, it's more of a, like I said, a generic level, learning how to set things up, learning how to process, how to find an out of the box report. And then the second one is generally your system integrated testing, which is SIT, or UAT, your user acceptance testing. Then they offer a mock go live, and of course your go live into a production environment. DMF will do and hold a data migration workshop. So that will be a meeting that involves you as the client, your key players, your implementation partner, and the DMF team. You'll review the data migration process. They have a wonderful PowerPoint they present. You will look at your project schedule for the implementation. And then you will look at the client tasks and responsibilities, as well as define what the responsibilities are for the DMF team. They're going to set up a migration server deployment and source of the data export from Lawson. And I'll explain a little bit more about this in the Visio that I've put together for this. They do import mapping and then confirm migration readiness. So they also have that data archiving service piece I spoke of earlier. So where they take that, any data that you're not migrating, the legacy Lawson data gets archived into the Infor data lake. And again, that's a conversation that you need to have with your customer manager and decide how that process is going to look, or even if that's what you will use to archive your Lawson legacy data. And then they hold a post-migration exit interview. So once the migration is complete, the DMF team is going to get back with you and the client. They're going to go through how long it took, how many records were processed, any issues that they have, any concerns, etc. It really is a very good process. From a client perspective, you have some responsibilities, and those will be to fill out the migration questionnaire and artifact checklist. This is, again, usually done in collaboration with your implementation partner, and it goes through things about how many companies do you have, what is the start of your fiscal year, what years are we going to include in the migration, etc. What is the name of your vendor group? What is the name of your vendor business group? What is the name of your purchasing group, etc. These are the key things they need to understand at the beginning. You are responsible for data mapping. There are templates provided for this, which are really great, that will pull out of the system the current. So if we're taking accounting units, there are scripts that are run, and we'll talk about this in the Visio I put together, but there are some pre-migration scripts that have to be run by your technical team, and those will pull out these documents that you can bring into Excel, and it actually lists out all the companies you have, all the accounting units, all the accounts, and then you can do mapping straight from those. So it's depending on the volume you have and the number of companies and accounting units, I think it's a good process to use. You are responsible for pre and post migration steps. So a pre-migration step is to work with your implementation partner to build your FEG, right? They will build it, but it is a collaboration to ensure that what you're building is what's going to support your future financial and purchasing structure, as well as getting ready and prepping for the migration. And then there are post-migration steps that have to be done. Both, again, have worksheets attached to them. Data validation. So data validation is very important. Once the data is migrated, you want to take a look and make sure everything you had from Legacy Lawson is in FSM and that you're seeing what you expect to see. And then, of course, testing. So usually that first migration pass is done before CRP, and you're doing testing against that data that you've migrated. So the documents that Infor provides are that questionnaire and artifact checklist, all the mapping templates, the pre-migration scripts that have to be run, the pre and post migration checklist templates, the discovery exit document, and then a data validation workbook. So that data validation workbook has steps and really tells you what you should be looking for. Now, from our perspective as an implementation partner, we have modified ours to include additional steps that we want our clients to look at to ensure that everything's caught. And, there is not, as you all know, not everyone does everything the same, right? Not necessarily in Legacy Lawson, and certainly not in the new system. One client may use certain modules where another doesn't. There's big changes around how invoices on a receivables standpoint are done in Lawson versus FSM. So because of those enhancements and the new processes in the new system, we kind of customize some of these post-migration and data validation workbooks to meet the needs of our clients. So they know what they don't have to look at and what they do have to look at. So here is the Visio that I put together. It's very high level, but it gives you an idea and a visual of what's going to occur when you engage the DMF team. So we start out with your implementation partner building that FEG, right down here. So they've got to get that ready. That's got to be done in order for the migration to occur. The client or you all will do that migration questionnaire. Your IT department will run those pre-migration scripts, and that information is going to be sent over to your DMF team. The pre-migration steps will also identify if there's things, gosh, in our last DMF migration, we caught things where I know a lot of the times in Lawson, you'll find records that are skewed and need to be corrected, and you may need to obtain the help of your IT department to get those cleared up. You'll find things like invalid project dates that are going to be a concern based on the parameters of your migration. So it identifies those things and allows you to get those fixed, as well as those mapping templates. Then you're going to perform your data mapping and provide that to the DMF team as well. So then DMF is going to hold their workshop. It's usually an hour and a half, right? They're going to present a lovely PowerPoint. They're going to talk through your checklist and ask if you have any concerns. They're then going to determine, based on data mapping, the scripts that were run, and what your checklist indicates for parameters, if you are ready for your migration. So they perform migration readiness. Once they've decided you're ready to go, they export out of FSM your finance enterprise group. So that's your basic financial structure, right? That includes your GL and all of the finance structure related to it, your purchasing information. So we have to have the purchasing companies, things along that line, or I apologize, not the purchasing company, your purchase groups, et cetera, set up. So they'll export FSM out, and then they will export the source data from Lawson. They're going to put those two together, and they're going to load them to the migration server. So that's an Infor server, just like you would have if you were in the cloud working at your desk. They then pull in those data mapping templates that you have mapped that data. So they're basically transforming the Lawson information into what it's going to look like in the new system. And then once they've done that, sometimes here we'll find some errors. Sometimes you could be missing an account. It does happen once in a while. Somebody forgets to activate or inactivate an account. Once that's all complete, any errors are resolved, then they usually take, the first migration can take a week or two. They don't give it a lot of, they don't, think it's urgency, I guess. They don't give it a lot of urgency for the first pass because they're looking at everything, making sure it's right. Once that's all done and they're ready to go, then they export that data out of the migration server and they put it back into your FSM environment. So your Infor Cloud Suite environment. All right, once that's done, then they have that exit interview. And that exit interview includes you, the client, your implementation partner, and the data migration team. And that's when, again, they tell you how long it took, how many record counts you have, etc. At that point, you're then doing data validation, right? And you're working with your implementation partner to get information out of Lawson to validate against reports like a trial balance, an income statement, the balance sheet, the PO 230. Lynette's going to shoot me if that's wrong. So you're looking at those things and you're comparing, right? To make sure, I had 50,000 vendors in Legacy Lawson. Do I have 50,000 vendors in FSM? So those are the kind of things you're comparing. And then from that point, once data validation is complete, you're doing testing. And you're ready to complete generally CRP. And once CRP is complete, you start discussing what you're going to do for your next data migration pass. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about migration efforts. So I don't know of an organization today that does not have time and resource complaints. We're all asked to do more with less, every organization that I know. So what does DMF do for you from that aspect? Well, the conversion efforts flip from extracting all the data out of Lawson, preparing uploads, or working with your tech team to do DB imports and getting all of that ready to then load into the new system. And you're doing module by module, you're doing setup, configuration, and then you're getting in, once that's loaded, then you're pulling in historical transactions and you're bringing them through interface tables to get them into the system. And it can take large amounts of time to do that, especially if you're migrating large amounts of data. So this flips that, right? And it's all done at once with this tool set that Infor's provided. So it expedites the process. It reduces the manpower on the client side as well as the implementation partner side. It allows you to concentrate on transformation and optimization versus all of this data prep. There's mapping pre-migration, which is great. You're resolving migration errors during the pass, and then you're doing data validation post-migration. So it really does reduce the effort from the traditional conversion options that you utilize, if it's the right opportunity for your organization. So validation and testing effort. So I talked a little bit before about the level of effort being different for each migration pass. So validation and testing should be done at some level for every migration pass, right? Your first migration pass should really focus on setup and balances. You want to make sure you got all of your migrated data, right? Because unless there is some major change to something within Lawson, going forward, a lot of that will remain the same, right? You're looking at, so for instance, if you're bringing over 3 years, and that's for your first migration pass, and we'll just use January to December because that's the easiest. So your first migration pass includes, through December 31st of 2024. So your next migration pass happens in April of 2025. You have then the opportunity to look at maybe quarterly up through December 31st, 2024. And if all of those balance out and everything trues up, then you can look at the individual months of January, February, March, and April. So that's what I mean by different levels of effort for each of the migrations. Because if you're doing and following generally accepted accounting practices, you are not going back and reopening prior years to make large changes in the system. So that's why you look at that, you determine with your implementation partner what's the best route to take around each validation pass. Then your subsequent, passes can be more lenient. If your organization requires stricter rules around that, then we do full validations every time. All of these things are going to determine what your cutover is going to look like when you go live, and that has to be taken into consideration. If it takes a long time to validate and you are doing full passes on validation, then you may consider reducing the amount of data you're going to load historically. UAT migration and mock go live should really be the full validation. Those are your practice runs for go live. Obviously a mock go live especially, but I would also recommend it for UAT. And it may be also a good practice to get some of your higher level users in to help you with as well. So this is going to prep you for go live. Very important. And I can't stress enough, be prepared. In order for any project to be successful, and I know it's difficult these days to do because of what we're asked to do with so much less, but these type of projects really need the necessary resources in order to ensure success. That is just vitally important. All right, so after all we've talked about, is this the best opportunity for your organization? So what do you need to consider? Making an informed decision is obviously the best path to making sure you're successful with both your implementation as well as migrations. So talk about your financial restructure. If you're doing a complete financial restructure, then no, this is not the option for you. If you're expanding your general ledger stream, will that support DMF migration? If you're doing a reorganization, not the tool for you. And does your vision align with what DMF can offer? So all of those things need to be considered. And one other important thing to say, and we all know we have it, when I was a user and had an AP department, I was as guilty of this as anyone, but what's the state of your data? If the majority of your data is so far beyond repair, then I don't really think you want to use DMF, because remember, you can't exclude things. So at that point, you're going to want to pick and choose what you're converting. We don't see too many clients that are that bad, but it's something to consider. And which is why cleanup, data cleansing at the beginning is so important. So if you aren't thinking about going to FSM, start your data cleanup now. Even if you decide not to go to FSM and you go to SAP or Workday, start the cleanup in advance. It's so important. And then again, as we talked about earlier, pristine and cutover planning. There's limitations for a pristine build. So based on what you're building after a migration can also impact how many years of history you're going to bring over for go live, right? So time and effort related to building new modules for each pass, and then the impact that has a direct impact to the number of years that can be migrated via DMF. All right, so we've done this a couple of times. I will tell you that it is a product that hasn't been used regularly until more recently, right? And it's really becoming quite popular. And the reasons around that are simply because of the time savings, right? I think, I know there's several consultants on this call that will tell you, when we first started loading data, we were using Excel sheets. And because of sheer volumes of some of our clients, because they were so large, it can take hours. I remember a client, we loaded their budgets and it took 18 hours to load the budgets, right? So a full implementation, I want to say, I mean, I hate to give you any numbers and I won't, but a full implementation can be really reduced by using this tool. So here's some of our clients' feedback based around where they are in the process. We had a GHR client back in 2023 that made a comment that DMF saved their internal technical team hundreds of hours. This is not a joke, hundreds of hours by supplying and executing all the Lawson extracts, right? Because again, it's just pulled in one lump sum versus each piece to load into each module. So it allowed their technical and business teams to focus on mapping and data validation. So we have a current client who's explained that the process worked well and DMF stayed in communication with their implementation partner throughout the process, reducing the hours they would have had to spend extracting and loading data. And then also another current client indicating that the process reduced needed resources and data validation was a good exercise in helping them to understand the differences between legacy Lawson and the new version FSM. So, like I said, a really good tool if it's the right fit for your organization. So a lot of conversations just need to occur around that. So that pretty much completes my presentation for today. So I will open it up to questions.
And Deb, we do have one in the chat.
Yep.
When migrating multiple years of data, did you start from the earliest year and move forward to current year? Infor suggested we migrate in the current year and then after go live, migrate in the previous years. This was specific to payroll data. We were not comfortable with that suggestion. Is that even possible?
So when you migrate in multiple years of data, yes, I would start from the earliest going forward. There are some impacts on the financial side due to that. For instance, if you're pulling in 3 years, and let's just say we're starting with 2020, we've got to build out 2019 in order to be able to build those balances forward for finances. I would assume the same would be true for payroll. Valerie, I will be very honest with you, I am not a payroll person. However, I don't know that I, as a consultant, would ever suggest that we pull in current year and then go back and build previous years, because your financial statements rely on the previous years to ensure balance sheets, income statements, and financials are in line. And payroll is included in all of that. So to effectively be able to ensure that your financials are in alignment and have not changed, I would definitely start at the beginning and move forward. I hope that answered your question. Is it possible? Yes, but again, I would not do it. Anything else? So either I was really good at this or bored you all to tears.
Oh, here we go. Do you have recommendations for data archiving? We are looking for solutions for employees to be able to access their paycheck information for multiple years.
Oh, so you're really getting into the technical side, but Infor's data archiving tool is supposed to be pretty nifty. We're actually looking into that for a client we're currently working with DMF. So I would reach out to them on what's best. I'm not sure that from a financial perspective, I know what tables we can archive on our side. I'm not sure what tables can be archived from a payroll side. Mike, have you heard anything about archiving for payroll at all? Are you familiar with that?
No, I have not. No, I have not.
Okay. So I think your Infor customer manager would be best in offering solutions for how the employees can access their payroll options. Or Valerie, I'd be happy to reach out to one of our payroll people on this side and give you some options and email you. I will, Chandra, I'll make a note to do that.
Yep, I've got it jotted down as well.
Perfect, thank you. You are very welcome. Of course, you had to ask payroll things. All right, anyone else?
I'm not seeing anything else right now, but if y'all have any questions that pop up tomorrow, next week, whenever, please feel free to reach out to any of the contact information on this slide. Or like I said, we'll be sending out a replay and you can follow up with the person that sends that out to you, whether it's me or it could be a few others from our organization. So I think with that, we can probably wrap up a little early. And thanks again, Deb. That was great.
Yeah, thank you all very much for joining. Have a great day.